Hey everybody, welcome back to an Econ Games speaker series video. This week we have Dr. Michael Jones from the University of Cincinnati. He is the Director for Graduate Studies in the Masters of Applied Economics. So if you're interested in graduate school and you want to think like a Director of Graduate Studies and figure out who is going to be accepted to the program, you want to watch this episode. Dr. Jones, thank you for your time, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Really appreciate the invitation and looking forward to a discussion that I want to have with all of you. And so I always want to start with what I hope you take away from this discussion. I want to be respectful of your all's time. And so if this isn't going to fit for you, give you a chance to find something else to do with your time. So I want to go through in more detail about the economics master's degree market. I know a week ago, the presenter talked about graduate school in general, how you should think about PhD programs versus master's versus professional schools. But I am the academic director at the University of Cincinnati for the Master's in Applied Economics program. So I think it might be fruitful to just share a little bit of insight on how I think about master's programs, how I make admissions decisions, how I view students, how I work with companies in the market to place students. So I'm hoping that you become a more sagacious participant. It's kind of one of my favorite words. Interestingly, it was used to about a few hundred years ago to describe a keen sense of smell. So somebody who is sagacious has a very heightened sense of smell. And so I hope as you go through this presentation that you'll start to be able to sniff out the good parts of master's programs and some of the parts to stay away from. I'll talk a little bit about crypto economics. This is my personal interest. I teach in this area. I do some research in this area, and the University of Cincinnati is doing some really exciting things in crypto. And you can't really spend a day on the internet without seeing something about crypto. And of course, the last week has been brutal for my portfolio. So hopefully get a chance to talk a little bit about that. And then certainly want to get your questions answered. This is for you. The presentation is for you to have any of the questions answered about master's programs or crypto. All right, so why I decided to study economics. My background is not in economics. I am not an economics major. So that's one thing to know. If you wanted to go on and study at the master's or PhD level, you do not necessarily need to have an undergraduate degree in economics. I studied classics and computer science at the University of Kentucky, actually, and I worked for a few years for the Cincinnati Bell telephone company, and then I worked for Nielsen here in Cincinnati. And what I got interested in economics was a lot of the conversations I was having with people in my company was around why are we not competing with other telephone companies, with Verizon, with Sprint, because we were allowed to compete with other companies, but we didn't move into their territories. And so I found that kind of an interesting phenomena, and I wanted to learn more about why these companies were competing. And so I decided to go back to school. I went to the University of Notre Dame and did a PhD in economics and graduated in 2012. So I am just a curious person. I want to know more about how the world works, and economics is the perfect place to scratch that itch. And I'm sure many of you are econ majors, and that's what got you interested in economics. And so I have been at the University of Cincinnati now this is my 10th year. For about the last 5 years, I've been the academic director for the Master's in Applied Economics program. And I want to talk a little bit about that now. So I'm tentatively titling this discussion Confessions of an Academic Director, as opposed to Confessions of an Economic Hitman. So I'll hopefully give you some insight thinking of how academic directors look at applications, they think about the program, shaping the curriculum, and then placing students into the careers that they want. So let's make this interactive. I've got a quiz question for you here, so please use the chat function. And let me know which university you think has the highest ranking Master's in Economics degree program. However, I didn't specify the ranking. I didn't specify the group that's doing this, but let me know in the chat what you think what university might have the highest ranking Master's in Economics degree program. I will really appreciate University of Cincinnati. It is not University of Cincinnati. Okay, you got LSE, Harvard, Columbia, or a school like it, Stanford, Chicago, MIT. Okay, so notice here, Stanford. All right, so MIT, yep, that makes sense, because MIT, Stanford, these are your top schools, certainly for the PhD. And maybe you talked about this last week, obviously going to Harvard, MIT, any of the Ivy Leagues. But MIT does not have a master's program. And most of the PhD programs do not have master's programs that you can apply to. So if you do a PhD at MIT, at Stanford, at these places, you might get a master's along the way, but they don't actually have master's programs that you can apply specifically to in order to graduate from after 1 or 2 years, which might be surprising to many of you once you start doing some research around master's programs. And there's actually a reason why that happens, which I want to talk about, because most of these programs have specialized in what they do really well. And if you go to the AEA website, they have a list. That website URL is at the bottom of this presentation. I'm sure this can be shared. Happy to share these slides with any of the participants. But you can go through and see where all of the master's programs, what universities they're associated with. And what you'll find here, and even on this screen, you'll see that there's, UPenn there. They have PhD programs. So I'm sorry, I cut off the first column of X's. So what you see here with my cursor here, that first column of X's, they have a PhD program. That second column of X's, they have a master's program. So again, you can see UPenn has a PhD program, does not have a master's program. I picked this because it's my alma mater. Notre Dame has a PhD program. They do not have a terminal master's program. For some reason, they misspelled Notre Dame here. We'll forgive the AEA for that. But the PhD programs, they don't often offer a master's program that students can separately apply to. And the reason that is because most master's programs are terminal master's degrees. And so what does that mean? That means that most programs are educating students, they're providing opportunities for students to go right into industry, right into a career path with a company, a nonprofit, maybe a government organization. But the terminal master's programs are not designed to go on to a PhD. Now, that's not always the case for some students. Many of you might think about going on to a PhD program, and the master's degree could be a stepping stone toward that. And that's certainly fine. Even in our program, we have a student right now who is applying for PhD programs. And every year we have 1 to 2 students at the University of Cincinnati that will go on to do a PhD program. So it's certainly an option. And we'll talk about why you might decide to do a master's before a PhD. But know that most master's programs are training and educating their students to get a job in the private sector. All right. So I want to ask one more question, another quiz here, because I want to start thinking like an economist when we look at what master's programs you might want to apply to and how you might want to make a decision. So which type of student generates the most profit for a university? So which type of student do you think generates the most profit for a university? Is it the undergraduate student? Is it the master's student? Or is it the PhD student? Which student do you think generates the most profit? Okay, masters. I would say undergrad, masters. Okay. You're good. So in this case, no one said PhD, which is good because PhDs are definitely money losers for universities. They have very small class sizes. The faculty who teach them are very expensive. And in almost all cases, the PhD is fully funded. So the student does not pay tuition. And not only do they not pay tuition, they typically receive a stipend. Not always, but they will most often receive a stipend anywhere from 15, 20, 25,000, depends on the university. So PhDs are very much money losing, at least in the short run, for the university. Undergraduates, depends kind of, a lot of universities maybe break even on them. The tuition for undergraduates is significantly cheaper than master students. But the place where universities make the most money is actually on the master's degree. So let me just kind of show you what it looks like for the University of Cincinnati. And so here's the full-time tuition per semester for a master's degree, the master's in applied economics. You'll see this for Ohio residents and then non-residents. So per semester, even in the state of Ohio, it's $12,000 a semester. And so over the 1 year that it takes to complete a master's degree, at least the sticker price is around $25,000. There's some other fees that usually get lumped in there. The undergrad rate for University of Cincinnati is around half of that. So the master's program, you'll almost always see this, that at the university you apply, the master's degree is significantly higher or more expensive than it is at the undergraduate. And for non-residents, so you see that far right-hand column there, it's over $30,000, and for out-of-state students or for international students. So these are very lucrative, frankly, for a lot of universities. And so what does that mean now? What are some of these implications if we take this and think about how we might want to decide what university to apply to? It's actually easier to get into a more prestigious university at the master's level. Might be kind of surprising. You might think, well, it's sort of much more difficult maybe to get into Columbia's master's degree than it would be Columbia's undergrad. After all, these are master's students. But it turns out that if you look at the acceptance rates at the master's versus, say, the undergrad or PhD, because many programs make a significant amount of money at the master's level, they actually tend to have larger class sizes at the master's level, and it's frankly a little bit easier. And you might surprise yourself about, in terms of getting into a university at the master's degree, you might get into something that you never would have thought you got into it as an undergrad. And quite frankly, like, I don't know that I would have got into Notre Dame even at the PhD level. I wouldn't have got in as an undergrad. So you might think about, I know maybe you're nervous, you're thinking master's level, it's going to be very difficult, but I would encourage you to apply broadly when you start thinking about the programs and really stretch yourself. Like, it's okay to have a handful of schools that are difficult, you might think, at the undergrad to get into, but maybe you've got a chance at the master's level. So now I want to come back to answer the question, what's the highest ranking master's program? Nobody actually said the answer, and there's a few rankings out there. Turns out, places like Johns Hopkins usually gets ranked right up there as number one. They have one of the top master's programs. University of Maryland has a very good master's in economics program. But again, these aren't the MITs, the Stanfords, the Harvards. So if you thought about, I always wanted to go to Johns Hopkins or maybe Maryland or maybe George Washington, University of Michigan, I would encourage you, and we'll talk about the profile here in a second, put that in your list. Put that in your list of schools to apply to. So I'll give you this example. Love to know the criteria for rankings. Depends on the ranking. Every year, these groups will send out an email to the master's directors, and they ask for things like job placements. So what's your job placement rate? What is the typical GPA of students? What is the typical GRE scores? So they ask for the profile of the admitted students. So we provide that information back to the rankings group. So, and I can share a little bit. So for example, UC, our average GRE score is 316. So we send that back to them. We send our GPA, I think it's like a 3.6 is our average GPA. So we provide that, and then they rank them. So let me give you an example. I'll use University of Cincinnati because I can't speak for, say, Johns Hopkins and what their admission criteria is. But let's just take a profile with 3.6 GPA in economics, maybe a 318 on the GRE. The GRE is out of 340 for those of you who are thinking about applying it for grad school. The quant section's out of 170, the verbal's out of 170. So you get a 318. You have good letters, but not amazing. This isn't an amazing letter of recommendation. And you can tell, if you're a director, you can tell when the professors really encourage and push a student. Maybe you've served as a TA and there's no spelling errors in your statement of purpose. So, but again, it's not an amazing, statement of purpose, but you can write. So the question is, does this student get in at UC? I'll use UC for an example. And no, I haven't given you the full profile. And so one thing I want to be careful of is we do not have checkboxes. Okay, so when I say this, I will say we do not have this hard criteria that if you get less than a 3.5, you can't get in. But I want to at least prompt the discussion. You haven't looked at the video, you haven't interviewed the student, but do you think the student gets in? You can use the chat. Once again, use the chat. Yes or no? Yes. 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 I love these students, right? I mean, these are good students. Yet they're capable of doing the work. There's no red flags. 158 on quant. It's a good score. And again, I said that we don't have hard cutoffs. I'm sure maybe you'll ask questions. Last year we didn't admit anybody with less than a 150 on the quant. It's not to say that there might be an exception. So if you do have like a 146, it's probably going to be pretty hard to get into a lot of master's programs. So I don't want to say there's a floor, but you have a 158. You've got good letters of recommendation, 3.6 GPA. And so what's a red flag? Cheating. Yep. If I see that on the transcript, like, frankly, and this is maybe is a little bit of, again, this is kind of the inside, I don't want to deal with it. Like there better be a very good reason or something happened. Like I would want an explanation of sort of what happened. But, if there's something like, there was a academic misconduct, that's a red flag. The other red flag, frankly, is your letters of recommendation. Your letters of recommendation, you should always ask to waive to see them, because I've never written a letter of recommendation if it's not waived. And I should tell my students that, because you want to have an honest conversation with the other directors. So a potential red flag is if I look at a letter of recommendation, and I have gotten this before, that it basically is saying, the student has some issues and probably, might not be successful. The two red flags I'd say are letters of recommendation, and then again, like maybe an academic misconduct. And maybe there's something else, and something kind of weird comes up. But generally, if I look at this is a good student, and even if you had like a 3.5 or maybe you had a 154, like it's a holistic admission. But master's students, we love these students. They're capable of doing the work. So I look at this and I say, I want to make sure that the student graduates from the program. The worst thing that I've only had this happen one time in the 5 years is that the student didn't make it. Like they just could not do the material, and I still feel bad about that. So one of the criteria that I'm looking for is if you come to UC and anywhere, if you come to a master's program, we do not want to see you drop out. We want you to be successful. And so I am also not going to admit somebody that frankly can't be successful. So if you've really struggled in calculus, like you're not going to be successful. Another red flag. So let me maybe bring up another red flag. You got to, maybe your overall GPA is a 3.6, but you got like a C- or a D+ in calculus. I want to see your trajectory. So someone asked the question, do you take into consideration the direction of the GPA? Yes, that is an excellent question, RO, because you may have gotten a D in calculus, but if I saw later on you took econometrics and you took maybe calculus 2 and you got a B+, I know that was kind of a fluke, or you had a bad semester. And look, everybody has bad semesters. Certainly with COVID, we all know that. So it's not going to be a red flag to completely throw you out. But if you got a D+ in calculus and then you got a C in Calc 2, and you're still kind of marginal, that's a bit concerning, frankly. Will you be able to be successful? So as long as you don't have the red flags, master's students, master's programs, we want to see these kind of students, right? I mean, they will get a job. You will successfully graduate from the program, because I know just historically these students have done well. You'll get in. So I would encourage you to, really think about where you want to go. So let me ask briefly about what about jobs after a master's degree? So this is very different than a PhD program. On the right-hand side, you'll see this type of flow diagram where it says the ranking on the left-hand side, what school you went to, and then where you ended up after your PhD. It's a great chart. Again, you can see the URL, I think, on the bottom there. But if you went to Harvard, MIT, a couple things to notice this. You also fall when you go to another academic university. You're going to fall on average, 40, 50 spots in your rankings. important takeaway from this is ranking at the PhD level very much matters. You want to get into there's just almost no exceptions to this. You want to get into the highest ranking PhD program you possibly can. Just you're going to have more resources, you're going to have more connections. That's not necessarily the case with the master's program. Okay, so when you think about the master's program, again, we're preparing students to get jobs. So the types of job that students get is, if you're an undergrad econ, you might start out as a research analyst at a market research firm. Like that maybe is a typical job. If you have a master's degree, you start out as a senior research analyst. So that means you get a title, maybe you have a $10,000 to $15,000 pay bump, $20,000 in some cases. That's typically the path for a master's student. You go from the entry level, maybe a basic business analyst to a senior business analyst, pricing analyst to a senior pricing analyst. And frankly, master students, they work at a lot of great places. Our students have gone on to Amazon, Microsoft, and tech. If you're interested in consulting, Compass Lexicon. If you're working in the financial services, any of the banks, marketing, P&G, Unilever, Nielsen. So at the master's level, the companies, they are pretty open to where they're going to hire. So you're not necessarily at a disadvantage to going to, if you didn't go to a top Ivy League school, or you didn't go to that, really prestigious master's program, it's not really going to hurt you so much in the corporate sector. A couple of exceptions, we don't place students at McKinsey. There still are those programs. Goldman Sachs, I've had one student in the last 3 years work there. So again, we're not placing at maybe those sort of very top level, but you have a lot of opportunities at the master's level. So kind of a couple closing thoughts here. Really think about maximizing your own ROI on this. You can use this to your advantage. PhDs are very competitive, extremely, extremely competitive to get into a PhD program. Less competitive at the master's degree. So if you are thinking, I want to come back to the original point about when would you do a master's, you may want to think about doing a master's at a place that one of those programs that does overlap with the PhD. So I mentioned, say, Michigan, University of Maryland. Because doing the master's there, you have an opportunity to maybe interact with colleagues, other faculty who might be able to make good letters of recommendation for you. So maybe stretch yourself a little bit on the master's. But I would encourage you to maximize your own ROI. So most programs will have teaching assistantships. About half of our class gets a TA position. So that means you work 10 hours a week. You get paid $16 an hour for those 10 hours a week. It's competitive, so we really look for tutors. If you tutored in the past, so going back to that profile, love those students. All right, I mean they get plugged in right away. But think about research assistants, part-time. One thing I would say is that very few programs have full tuition scholarships. It's because master's programs generate revenue for the university. They are not giving. We actually don't have any. We don't have any full tuition scholarships. We do offer scholarships. Those can range from 4,000, maybe you have a great GRE score, 8,000, even 10,000. I've given $10,000 scholarships for really top students, but we don't have full tuition scholarships. So I would encourage you to also think about location, because most master's programs are really connected to their community. We have great alumni that are trying to always hire our students. So if you want to work in Cincinnati, UC is a great place to go. But where do you want to work? In what industry? If you want to be in the federal government, I'd love for you to be at UC, but maybe you need to be at Johns Hopkins or George Washington or Georgetown. Those places. So think about where you want to work and in what industry. But be strategic about your master's program, because there's an opportunity to really maximize your ROI, which is, I think, different than, say, the PhD program. So I want to pause here and see if there's any questions about, this is kind of a deep dive into the master's degree. Do I have any questions? Because I want to take about 5 minutes or so to talk about UC specifically, but anything in general.
Thank you, Michael. This is very helpful while everybody unmutes and gets ready to ask a question. And I know you're going to get to the UC specifics of it, but can you talk about some industries that your program is connected with?
Yeah, a lot of master's programs really focus on developing those technical skills further. So typically at the undergraduate level, you might have, you almost always will have an econometrics class. That's a requirement. Maybe like we offer a second econometrics class, but you really don't have those good technical skills. You just don't. And so any of the master's programs, you can think about it as econometrics on steroids. So what they do is and I'll get into this in a second, but we have more econometrics and time series and panel data and Bayesian econometrics. So we really beef up your technical skills because that's why you get that senior analyst position. That's why you get that pay raise. And the jobs that are hiring those positions, a lot of, frankly, finance right now, finance pays pretty well. So the Fifth Thirds, the U.S. banks, they are paying six figures. We have had students that are, which is, I need to like quit my job and and go into what my students. I'm not kidding. I mean, I've got students with six-figure offers from the banks, and so financial services. The other big one is market research. That's because we're in Cincinnati. They don't tend to pay as well, but the Nielsen's, the 8451s, the Dunnhumbies, the P&Gs, the Unilevers. So those also tend to be pretty big hires of master's programs because they have, again, those technical skills to build models, to work on pricing. We do not do public policy that much. So again, if you're thinking like, I really want to be in the federal government, we place maybe 3 or 4. We've had people that go on to become Fed analysts. We have people that work at Goodwill as as economists, but we don't have a lot on that side. So maybe if that's your interest, then think about other places.
Anybody else with a question?
I have a question. What do you look for in a student that is undergrad but is not studying economics, but looks to pursue economics and masters?
I love the question because we do not require econ majors. In fact, I love students who do not have an econ background. They typically do as well, if not better, than some of our econ students. The reality is you still need to have some math. So if you haven't had calculus, it's just not going to work. Like you have to have had at least a semester of calculus. And I'm looking for those students who frankly do well. So we've had English students, we've had philosophy students. I have a biology major, but they've had a calculus class, they've had a statistics class, and I can tell that they're passionate about their subject. And frankly, if they do well on the GREs, they're gonna be fine. They might struggle. What happens when our students come in, the econ majors, they tend to do well in the first 6 to 8 weeks. I mean, the reality is they know the language, they get up to speed pretty quickly. But if you're a biology student or a philosophy student, after 6 to 8 weeks, you really do catch up with the rest of the students, and you're fine. So I am looking for, because I don't know that major very well, I am looking at GPA. I am looking at GRE scores. So if you can show that you're capable of doing well in those areas, I love those students.
Thank you.
What else? Let me talk quickly about UC, and then we can kind of wrap this section up because I do want to share a little bit about the University of Cincinnati. What do they look like? In our case, we are primarily full-time students. We consist of, our program has about 25 students. It varies between 20 to 25. About 20% of them, so about 5 or 6 students every year are part-time. So they will work full-time and then they want to pursue their degree over a period of 2 years. Most full-time master's programs are 1 year. Again, it's that accelerator in your technical skills. It's that accelerator for econometrics and building that up. So what we have done is said, you're going to come in the fall, and all of our students, it's a cohort model. They start in the fall. You're going to take econometrics. It's just the workhorse of the program. You got to know econometrics. We teach using R. Some programs use Python, some programs use Stata. We use R. So if you've had R in the past, it's very helpful. I think the learning curve is a little bit easier. So you take micro theory, you take macro theory, economic data management, analysis, again, really kind of building up your skills. In the spring, you take time series. That's a requirement. You take game theory. We don't want you to just be somebody who sits in front of the computer and codes and doesn't know how to use data. So we actually require game theory. We want you to think about the data generating process and not just how to build the models themselves. And then you have electives. So electives are quantitative. We have panel data, Bayesian econometrics, spatial econometrics. But then we also have health economics. I'm teaching a cryptocurrency class. We have urban economics. We've got somebody teaching industrial organization, so competition and regulation. That depends on the faculty, depends on maybe the student interests. So in the fall for us, you're taking kind of the core classes. In the spring, you're taking a lot more of the econometric electives. We start in the late afternoon, like 3:30 to 4:30, but you're done by 7:50. Monday through Thursday, we really try to make this easy for the students to TA if they want during the day, so they can assist a professor. Some of our full-time students, our students who work full-time, that way they can continue to complete the program. But we try to be very accommodating for all different types of students. What does our program look like? All undergraduate majors are welcome. So we do not restrict it by majors. Priority deadline is March 15th. Most programs will have a deadline that after that point, there's a bucket of money. Essentially, you can think about a scholarship money that we have that we can distribute to students. So if you apply by March 15th, we'll make those initial awards, but I'll also award in advance and make admissions decisions in advance. So if you apply 2 weeks from now and I see your application in the queue, and again, you fit that profile, no red flags, you're looking good, there's no reason we can't turn around a decision in a couple weeks. We'll meet with a committee. I mean, we're not interested in extending this out. But if you get in before March 15th, you've got sort of the full range of scholarships and TAs. So I'll make the TA offers, right? But I only have so many TA positions. And so once those TA positions are out, I'm out. But the final deadline is June 30th. We have a rolling deadline. So continue to apply. You can see those course requirements: micro, macro, calculus, statistics. We do have a hard floor. I mentioned before, we don't really try to have check boxes, but our graduate school, unless you have I have to write a reason and a justification if you have less than 3.0. It's not to say I've done it once or twice. I've done it at least once. But if you don't have a 3.0 GPA, it's going to be, frankly, pretty hard, I think, to get in. I mean, you have to have a really compelling story. We do require the GRE. It could be the GMAT, GRE or GMAT. Some programs are starting to waive that at the master's. We have decided not to, only because I think it's really important for those students to do well. I don't want to admit you, and then it turns out that you just don't do well. So I think the GRE is somewhat informative. If you are an international student, again, we have hard floors on the TOEFL, which is basically a measure of language proficiency. Again, I can't waive that. Like the graduate school says, you have to have a minimum score on these things. But then you have your standard resume, essays, transcripts. It's a pretty, pretty standard application form, but plenty of opportunity. My email, m.jones, I'll put it here in the chat. I am more than happy to meet and talk with anybody, or shoot me an email. Happy to have more conversations about your specific situation. I know everybody's got a different background. We also have info sessions that you can sign up for. I don't want to use the whole time to just to advertise UC. So if there's more questions, we have info sessions. I'm happy to go through in detail, and or just one-on-one. So questions about UC specifically? Anybody have any questions about UC specifically? Love to. There's your chance, open book here.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is a very candid conversation, and one that many DGSs don't have. It's kind of like a black box. Let me ask you a question that recently came up in discussion. Let's say you're a junior in college and you're thinking about applying to a graduate program, but kind of want to be able to have this conversation. Do you welcome people reaching out to you, asking questions via email? Or is that something that is like a big turnoff to DGSs?
Oh no, personally, it's not a turnoff at all because it shows your excitement, it shows your enthusiasm. I think students can sometimes be intimidated, but somebody who's already thinking about that as a junior, even before they're senior, that's just that's a good signal. You know, that student is intellectually curious, they want to do this. Now, if it becomes a very involved conversation, if it's like a you know, first year, second year, I might be like, hey, you know, let's wait a bit. Here's an info session. I might not have the same one-on-one conversation, but if it's a junior, a senior, sure, like happy to do that. I might be the exception, but
Yeah, Dr. Patel just put something in the notes. I see a lot of NKU and UK students here. We'd love to plan a trip to UC. I mean, it is home of a winning football team. We need to visit that place. But yes, we'll plan it out. And if you're an NKU or UK student, be on the lookout for possible visits up there. There's a couple more questions.
yeah, these are great questions. When will UC provide I-20? Okay, so this is where like I am not an open book because I always say, and you should always listen, like talk to the international office because these things change so much. And like the worst thing I can do is say like, oh, I think this is going to happen. Or when you start talking about CPT and OPT and the rules, I always say you need to talk to the international office because if you get that wrong, students go home, right? And so I don't jeopardize that. So when UC provide an I-20, I'm happy to make the connection, Habib. If you email me, I can send you the contact information at UC International. But I don't really answer those questions just because I don't want to give wrong information. Does the UC master's program have a specialty? Yes. Most master's programs will start to specialize in areas. So for us, we have very strong on the econometric side. We have some great econometricians, time series, Bayesian econometrics. We have several faculty who do Bayesian econometrics. So we'll be offering those classes. We're not strong in macro. Again, I'll just be honest. Like we have few faculty in macro. It's not something we have the core class, but if you want several electives and like international trade, that's not us. You might want to go to a different master's program. But you're right, Corey. You'll notice when you look at their curriculum. So like we're loaded up on econometrics. We have 3 game theorists in our department, so we're kind of strong in those areas, but we're not strong in macro. So, and yeah, to answer your question, like they're looking for. We do have strong R skills. We do have strong modeling econometric skills. And so the companies that hire from our program are looking for those specific type of skills. Okay, I've got like 15 minutes left. So I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I thought this was at least enough time to kind of talk about, I just want to talk briefly about this because it's fun. And many students are interested in this. I'm actually teaching a class right now at the master's level. I'm teaching a class in crypto economics to our students. And so it might be a fun reason to come to UC as well. So who owns, okay, let me answer Habib real quick. Usually we have about 25 to 30 students. We've had as high as 35, but we're targeting somewhere in between, honestly, like 20 to 35 students. Because beyond that, we don't have the faculty. We have to split the class. And so we only want to have one class. And so it's anywhere from 20 to 35 usually is depending on the quality of the student. Okay, so real quick, does anybody here own cryptocurrency? Any yeses or nos? Who owns cryptocurrency? Yes. Yes, all right. This is not surprising. Yes, no, but 1, 2. Yes. Who owns an NFT? No. No. I would. Okay, I'm a yes and a yes. Who has ever voted in a DAO? Decentralized Autonomous Organization. Who's ever any cast? Yeah, what's that? Okay, so we reached our. Yeah, that's great. A lot of buzzwords, a lot of hype in this space. DAO stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. Best description of that, it is a shared bank account with a group chat. So shared bank account, yeah, we'll see how. Shared bank account with a group chat. So what happens is basically we will, in a DAO, many people will pull their cryptocurrency together, they'll lock it up, and then they will decide how they vote to spend that money, that cryptocurrency. So for example, you might have heard about the Constitution DAO a couple months ago, where $50 million was raised. Everybody contributed their cryptocurrency. They voted to basically acquire one of the copies of the Constitution. So these are kind of really innovative ideas in this space, and it certainly applies to crypto or to economics. You might say, well, why are we talking about this in economics? What does this have to do with a master's in applied economics? I only want to share that certainly student interest is really on the rise. This is old data from Coinbase, but at the time, just over half of the universities offered at least one course in crypto. Most of them are in the computer science department, but you will see finance, business, and econ offer these classes, and even in the law school. So right now, I'm teaching it in the economics department. I don't have time, but I want you to watch this video when you share the presentation. It's amazing. Milton Friedman actually predicts the rise of Bitcoin back in 1999. He calls it e-cash. And so he talks about it. I would highly encourage you to go watch this YouTube video. Milton Friedman was wise in a lot of ways, and he certainly forecasted that. So what does this have to do with economics? So most of our financial transactions go through a central financial institution, an intermediary. So if I'm there on the left-hand side and I want to, pay for my Skyline meal, it goes through an intermediary. It goes through Visa. It goes through Fifth Third, right? Everything goes through, ultimately, in this case, the highest regulation through the Federal Reserve, because they have the authority to regulate banks, for example. And so our financial transactions go through the intermediary, go through the institution. They are the ones who make sure transactions are valid. You have the money, that there's not any sort of nefarious activity going on, or they'll investigate it if there is some nefarious activity. So most of our financial transactions, again, PayPal, Venmo, Visa, Federal Reserve, it's all going through a central institution. But what's interesting about cryptocurrency is that it basically becomes a disintermediated financial system. So no longer do we have to necessarily go through one central point. We actually rely on a whole distribution of people who validate those transactions, who update the records and make sure that the people who want to move money from one account to another, that is a valid transaction, and that they actually have the money that they say they do. So yeah, that's the mining part. Great question. Yep. So all of these, again, we don't have time for the details of this, but basically the miners, they are the ones who, if I want to send Bitcoin from my account here on my cell phone, maybe we should do another topic on this later. We can do this. It's not Visa, right? That's validating it. It is this whole network of miners that are saying you have the money with your account, and that is a valid transaction, and then we are going to update that. And that account, by the way, anybody has access to, and can see those transactions. And by the way, nobody can go back and retroactively change the record of those transactions. So if I sent that money over to Corey, the worst thing is if Corey goes back and says, well, you really sent me twice the amount, or they start manipulating that, And so what cryptocurrencies, what they do is they basically rely on a decentralized or disintermediated network. So that's where the economics come in, okay? Because I have to reward people to update those transactions, right? What is the incentive for me to participate in this network? You got to reward me. Well, you get rewarded with cryptocurrency. So that's like just a basic background, but I want to share that because crypto economics, cryptocurrencies, blockchain, it really becomes the intersection of several disciplines. I have to understand incentives. How do I get people to participate in this network? Right? Why would you want to validate the money from, Corey to who else do we have here? Aro. Right? Why would I want to do that? You got to incentivize me. How do I incentivize somebody to keep it secure? So the economics come into play to also understand not only the incentives, but then what do you value these things at? All right. If I move cryptocurrency from one person to another, how do I value what that's in the marketplace? But I have to have computer science, right? Because this is all digital, right? This is programmable money. So I need to have the computer science background. I also need to have the math background. Okay. Most of this is done using sophisticated mathematics, particularly cryptography. So crypto becomes this intersection of really multiple fields. And so it's hard to explain even in just this like 5 minutes what it is. Hopefully, if you haven't really had much exposure to it, you got the point in 5 minutes, but you need a multidisciplinary approach. So you see in the next year, we're going to be launching a technology certificate where students get exposed to these ideas, not just from the business and economic side, but from the computer science programming side. So we'll be offering a certificate where you take crypto economics, but you also learn how to code. You also learn how to do smart contract programming. You learn how to manage your cryptocurrency, right, with the digital asset portfolios, but you also learn how to secure it. So a lot of exciting things coming on that front. And I'll just mention a couple things before I leave time for questions, which is we're going to be launching a crypto economics lab at the University of Cincinnati. If you're familiar with the area, it's right off 71, Interstate 71, and buildings are going up right now. And so we will have a physical space where we will have those mining hardware. We'll have miners in there. We'll have hardware wallets. We'll have sensors. We'll have lots of different toys to play with, and students and researchers and companies can come in. They can explore what is a mining machine. How does this work? How could I deploy this solution in my company? So we'll bring all these together. There'll be research. There'll be education pieces that'll be part of this. There'll be community. I'll share one example, which has been pretty fun. I've worked on here in the last few months. We had an alumni. Or not alumni, but a donor donate one of their crypto rigs actually to us. And they said, I'm also on the board of the School of the Creative and Performing Arts, which is a local school. And they said, would you be willing to mine crypto basically for this school district? It was broken at the time. And so I had an IS student, information systems student. He fixed it, we fixed some of the parts, and we set it up so that it's now mining crypto on behalf of this nonprofit. So we will send them a check and every quarter, and it's a way for that nonprofit to, one, learn about it, because students get to learn what it is. The donor got a tax write-off, so he wins. Everybody wins in this case, and so we've got that crypto rig that's being, in our space right now. We'll move that over. So. Lots of exciting things. If you're an economics student, we need more economists, frankly, because the people that are programming and doing a lot of the innovation in the space, they're just thinking about the technical, the computer science piece. How do I optimize the currency, or what's a more secure type of cryptocurrency? But we need people who think like economists, understand the business applications, understand. You talked about NFTs. Why would I launch an NFT? What's the market for NFTs? How do I think about a market structure? I've got structure that's just an image. I've got structure that I can use it in a game. Like, that's a different market. So the economists bring that structured thinking to the problem. And so if you have questions about that, I would love to talk to you further. All right, I want to leave at least 5 minutes for questions and discussion on that piece. So.
Thank you, Michael. I have so many questions, but I'll leave it to the attendees. Anybody want to jump in and have a question presented?
Lots of case studies. So let me just comment on that. We have companies that are like, I hear about this thing, like what's an NFT? And so they want to do an NFT fundraiser. You know, what does that look like? So students can help them think about this. I don't have time to show it, but like in my class, we bought an NFT. I had the students like go through and decide. I had some money from the university, and so if you're at all familiar with this space, there's actually a game called Zed Racing where the NFT are the horses, and so your NFT can be a horse, and you could race this horse. And so the student said, this is the horse we want to do. So we bought them and we raced them. And, you know, we saw like, well, what's the market value? Then we put them up on OpenSea, and then other people tried to buy our NFT. And by the way, Desmond Ridder has an NFT. So Desmond Ridder is the UC quarterback. He launched NFTs back in the fall. And so you could go to OpenSea right now, which is a marketplace for NFTs. And you can kind of see like how has the market value of Desmond Ridder's NFT changed when UC went to the playoffs, when they won at Notre Dame. And so these are like great projects for students to work on, just to start to play around, download the data. Can you think of a model, like what determines the price of an NFT? So many questions, and there's a lot of students that if you have the interest and again those technical skills, then there's just so much room to play. So much things to explore.
Any questions before I ask my question? Because I'm dying to ask it. Okay, so what does an NFT actually get you other than, the asset? I guess it's an asset value. It's an intrinsic asset value, correct?
Yeah. So when you think about an NFT, it stands for a non-fungible token. The thing is, it is not the actual image or file itself. So people think like, oh, if I'm buying this NFT, I'm buying the image. You are not. You are buying basically a certificate of ownership. And what that means is, so remember with the blockchain, going back to the cryptocurrency, what makes it powerful is I can't go back and change the transactions, right? I can't go back and say, I sent the money to this other person, right? You can't move that around. So an NFT builds on that technology and says, okay, if a person buys an NFT, what they do is they buy the certificate that points to where that file is actually stored. So nobody can go back and say, well, Michael doesn't own it. It's actually, Habib, because the blockchain secures that. So you own a certificate. You don't actually even own, the file itself.
So are there any examples where this is being used in the startup community? Because I could see this as, seed funding and opportunities to raise capital for new ventures. Do you have any examples of that?
Yeah, so nonprofits have started to do this as a way just to raise awareness. So you can buy an NFT and all the funds go to that nonprofit organization. So they use that as a fundraiser. And what's powerful about this is that the NFT can be programmed that anytime it gets resold, a fraction of that goes to the original owner. So you think about the traditional art market, you sell it, it's gone, right? You don't get the resale value. But now if that NFT gets sold to another person, I can write the code that says 5% goes to that original owner. So now as a fundraiser, this is awesome because I get the initial amount, and anytime that continues to get circulated, I can program it so I get 5, 10%, whatever you program, you will get a percentage.
Perfect. Thank you. Anybody else?
That's a good question, Jenny. Jenny does ask whether the approval of NIL made it possible for the player to have an NFT, or would he have been able to do that on his own, regardless of the rules?
Yeah, so again, funny kind of inside stories. I asked if we could buy the Desmond Ridder NFT. And the university came back to me and said no, because it was university funds that I had for the class. And they said, the university, right, cannot pay its athletes, which makes sense because the NFT, part of the proceeds goes to that athlete. So when Desmond Ridder or any other athlete has that NFT, they don't partner with the university. they partner with a third party who then provides the funding for them.
Other questions? All right. Well, Dr. Jones, thank you so much for your time, your insight. I am really excited to start planning a trip to UC. I love the campus, and I think our students will enjoy the time there. For everybody that's attending, a copy of this presentation and last week's presentation, the video will be uploaded on my YouTube channel, so you could access all this information in the future. Thank you all for being here. We don't have another actual session for the Econ Speaker Series until February 16th, I think, and that's the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland, talking about inclusion, diversity, and community outreach. So if you're interested in that work, please do attend. If you're an NKU student, we are in the process of finalizing our Econ Games conference teams. That will be done. We're meeting tomorrow, 3 to 4:15 in BC 359. If you're interested this year in participating in the Econ Games, please come and attend. We're going to be down in Lexington, March 24th and 25th to attend the Econ Games 2022 conference by Fisher Homes. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for being here. This is a sponsored video by the Econ Games. So make sure to follow the Econ Games on Twitter, Instagram, and on LinkedIn. The Econ Games is an opportunity for you to be engaged with data and experiential learning in economics. Our goal is to connect students with industry partners to help students upskill and learn about data analysis and coding and how that might impact their career. If you're interested, check out the econgames.com.